Good afternoon, welcome to Cabinet. Today, Tuesday, 22nd of February 2022 at 3 p.m. Members of the Cabinet, everybody's here except for Councillor Cassie Scott, who gave apologies. Item 2, minutes of previous meeting. Are they a correct record? Yes, thank you, members. Item 3, declaration of interest. If members have any interest, please complete the form and hand it in to Andrea after the meeting. Admission of the public. We've got 4 members of the public, Andrea, and I think they just give the deputation. Is that right?
Yeah, and there's no private items. Okay,
thank you very much. Item 5, deputations and petitions. We've got Mike Proud here. Mike, ready when you are to present your deputation. And David, I think you're just accompanying.
I'll kick off if that's okay,
Chair.
Okay,
yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for inviting us today. Civic Society, Huddersfield Civic Society, I'm chair of the Civic Society and my colleague is on the executive committee, like many other organisations now, is becoming more involved and more concerned about climate emergency and some of the issues that we face within our towns. We thank you for adopting the biodiversity net gain and providing an advisory note for that. We carried out late in 2021 some sampling of biodiversity metrics, if you like, just to see how the strategy was being deployed within the planning application process. One thing that we do appreciate is that the rules, if you like, the metrics that have been provided have been prepared by Natural England. And when you go through these metrics, they are so complex. It becomes an immense task for any officer of the council and members to try and monitor and enforce, let alone understand how to apply them. So we have actually looked very carefully at the advice note, which we're very pleased that Kirklees produced at an early stage. And we obviously are concerned about developers taking on the biodiversity metrics as their commitment to climate emergency. I'm going to hand over to Mike so he can actually outline the sample set of 5 planning applications that we looked at and how they stood up against the council's own strategy. Mike.
Thanks, David. Yeah, so as David said, we had a look at 5 application forms in the last quarter of last year, five planning applications, and we reviewed them. We assessed that sample against the council's own biodiversity strategy and action plan. So our sampling identified a number of what we might call mitigating factors or hurdles and complexities which Kirklees and other councils are expected to address. So our main findings were twofold. First of all, that developers seem to be able to pick and choose which elements of biodiversity net gain to include and which to ignore. So there's a lack of clarity from Natural England, in our view, on which aspects of biodiversity net gain are essential to planning application success and which are optional. And this seems to create loopholes which some developers might exploit. The second point was that decision making, as we could see from this 5 sample set by councillors or officers, appears to be inconsistent regarding this topic, biodiversity net gain. And it's partly driven, as David said, by the sheer complexity of the metric that you've been given by Natural England. So we've come up with, as a committee, 3 questions, and we make 1 recommendation for Cabinet. And please note, we're not looking for answers to these questions now. It's more that they might be addressed more properly as part of the council scrutiny process. So the first of these questions is resourcing adequate with the right levels of ecological expertise in the right places? We recognise that that's a big ask for councils at the present time. And the second question is there adequate understanding and prioritisation of biodiversity net gain by political decision makers in the council? And the third question is, what assurances are there that the follow-up and tracking of developer or applicant compliance with the post-approval conditions, and what assurance is there that this tracking and follow-up will be made by the council and the council's officers? Coming on to our recommendation, this is a wider one really, and it's that Natural England radically simplifies its process for biodiversity net gain. As David said, it's extremely complicated, and this should include simplification of the metrics, the calculation tools and the documentation, so that all stakeholders can focus on the essentials and make the reporting on biodiversity net gain accessible to the public. The reason that we think it's relevant to Cabinet is that could be submitted by the Council as a response to the current DEFRA consultation, along with any additional feedback that you might make. That consultation's underway at the moment, as you probably know. And that's it, thank you. So, sorry, I'll just finish off that in summary, we're highlighting a risk that the Council could potentially be making decisions which are going to cause significant problems in the years ahead that might negatively impact on planning biodiversity and our Kirklees response to the climate emergency.
Thank you. What I will do is I'll ask Councillor Peter McBride, who's a portfolio holder for this area, to respond. Councillor McBride.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mike. Thank you, David. Understand your concerns. Are we resourced adequately to respond to the requirements of the new Environment Act? Like many services and aspects of services, current provision is less than sufficient to meet the requirements under the new Act. Thus, we and West Yorkshire neighbouring authorities have commissioned a study to determine the implications and requirements of the new Environment Act. I think Kirklees actually is a bit ahead of the game in that regard. Is there adequate understanding and prioritisation of biodiversity net gain? The issue was addressed in the local plan, I think sufficiently at that time, but this legislation extends the requirement, and thus the issue needs to be fully revisited. The enhanced tracking requirements demand appropriate additional response from the Council, which is now being studied and will be fully addressed. So the point's made very validly that there's an additional requirement and an awareness of the lacking of the resource currently to fulfil the requirements and the need to address that. The Council's crucially concerned about the same issue and is trying to address it through more funding and through additional staffing. And it's critical. I do understand the point. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Peter McBride, and thank you, David and Mike, for your deputations. Obviously, this is a changing area of work, and the three questions you posed regarding resources, understanding and tracking. One of the things that I grapple with is willingness to change, because we all talk about climate emergency, we all know what the issues are, we all understand it, and I know people who are very committed to this agenda, and they drive towards diesel cars, and these are like vanguards of climate emergency, so there's a long way to go. And as politicians, part of our role is to actually create that commitment, that understanding, that willingness. But once again, thank you, and we will take on board what you said, and thank you, Peter, for that response. We'll move on to the next...
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Cabinet.
Thank you. We'll go on to the next item, which is item 6, questions by members of the public. We've got Claire Walters. Question to Councillor Naheed Mather.
Hi, and thank you for allowing me this time. I'm here not as a Green Parish Councillor, because I really don't want this to be seen as a political issue. I'm coming as a professional in wildlife conservation with a doctorate in ecology and a desire to say the one tiny vestige of wildlife habitat that we have remaining in Kirklees. I'm here as the last resort. I have tried over the last 2 years, through all means I could think of, to get the wildlife at Laneside Quarry protected. Now, one of the last refuges for wildlife is about to be degraded beyond repair. The animals that are there, in a little oasis in a vast desert of agriculture, are now in imminent danger. I'm here to ask you to help me save them, and for you to be able to say that Kirklees Council did all it could at a time when we're on the brink of losing so many species forever. Elliots were given permission to use Laneside Quarry as a landfill site in 2000. There were a series of mitigation measures they were required to carry out, and as far as I know, they complied with these. The site was then sold to Casey's, who did no work on the site, and the planning lapsed in 2015. Crompton's bought the site in 2019. Casey's had a new management plan drawn up in 2015, which they largely followed. And during the long period of inactivity, when the quarry was not worked, it improved year on year as a valuable habitat for wildlife. It is designated as an SSSI because it hosts great crested newts. It's also designated as a priority habitat as part of the UK Biodiversity Action Plan because of the priority species found there. These include grasshopper warbler, song thrush, reed bunting, lapwing and skylark, as well as warbrown and dingy skipper butterflies. Garden warbler, pipistrelle and nocturnal bats, all rare and declining with increasing speed, are found there. The site was an oasis for wildlife within a huge desert of agricultural land, and it can offer a home to In fact, you'd have to travel miles to find a wildlife reserve to enjoy as much richness as there is or was at Laneside Quarry. The original planning permission included the diversion of Cockley Beck and the destruction of the ancient semi-natural woodland that surrounded it. This contains ancient woodland species and over 200 mature trees. In 2019, Crompton's applied for a revision of the planning permission. I haven't seen the detail of this, but one assumes that continuing to manage the mitigation areas forms part of this. The permission to destroy the beck and the woodland remains. Since 2019, no management of the mitigation areas has been carried out, and the value for wildlife has declined. The management agreement included a programme of control of invasive species. This has not occurred, and the mitigation ponds are becoming infilled with reed mace. Control of brambles. These have now overgrown the meadowland area around the ponds, which was a valuable site for butterflies. Most species had vanished from the site in 2021. Management of habitat for grasshopper warbler. This has not occurred.
Can I, I'm just conscious that it's question time, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but it sounds like it's more of a deputation, and even with deputations, you've got 5 minutes. So may I ask you if you can try and get the question if you have one, and just be mindful that if it is a deputation, you've got about a minute left. Thank you.
A minute left, as you say. So the council took no account of the declared climate emergency by allowing the felling of 200 trees when they reinstated the planning application. The reason I'm here today is because the quarry is on the brink of losing 2 species that are on the RSPB's red list, lapwing and skylark. If action is not taken now to remove the cattle from the hill, these birds will be lost and will not return. I'm asking that the council shows itself to be doing what it can to save the remaining wildlife, to use its power to protect this site. It would be a really important thing to do in this time of ecological collapse, to follow the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law, and to do what they can to protect these vulnerable species. The area has footpaths around the site, so the wildlife can be enjoyed by people living in the area and used for education. This is something, if the council were to do it, would be something it could be really proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. So Naheed, that's a deputation, I think, because the issues are there. Would you like to respond, or I'll ask you to respond how you want to?
Thank you, Claire. As you know, as a councillor for Dalton and my fellow colleagues sitting behind me, especially Councillor McBride, we have been involved right from the start. It is, and we are all passionate about our wildlife, our beauty spots, and aware of climate emergency. You're talking about an area which is in private hands, and the council, I know, was out this week or last week with the Environment Agency making a visit on some allegations regarding whether certain things were being done or not. I had some more information and another officer went out to make sure. I know that since we started meeting in October of last year, that the next meeting of the Laneside Quarry group is scheduled for 10th of March, which will allow us as a group to put on, to discuss the issues you mention here. We will all be there, and we need to work in partnership. We need to learn how to collaborate with private landlords and public spaces and residents. So let me reassure you that we will be working with Comptons, with Laneside, with Kirklees residents, and we will make sure that this haven is safeguarded as far as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm really encouraged by that. The one thing I'm worried about is 3 weeks is too long. I've been fighting to preserve the Skylarks breeding site for the last 2 years. By the 10th of March, they will have visited the site, seen it's not suitable, and left. So I despair that it's being delayed again.
Hey, do you want to respond?
We have agreed a meeting on the 10th of March, and that's when we will meet. And in the meantime, I will try and see what the officers report back from the environment visit and theirs this week. Thank you. And I will report to the committee on 10th of March.
Thank you, Councillor Mather, and thank you, Ms Waters, for your question and deputation. We'll move on to item 7, questions by elected members. Any? Councillor Cooper first, and then go on to you.
Okay, I've got three questions. The first one, I've heard the response from Councillor Mather to Claire. Just a few thoughts on that, really. And one was that, as I understand it, talking to Claire, that they have regular liaison meetings with they're supposed to have regular liaison meetings with the applicant, but they've broken those on 2 occasions. So I think one of the things that Kirklees could be doing is to try and get the applicants to honour the commitment to have regular liaison meetings, so they can have a real dialogue with them. So that's just one thought, just to pass that on. If we can do more on enforcement, I think it'd be good, and support ecologists to champion wildlife on the site. So just a few quick thoughts on that.
Councillor
Okay. Well,
so basically,
can you do those things?
I think to be fair, there was a question there, right?
Yeah, there was.
There was a question there.
No, Councillor Cooper, I've said the meetings are happening. We had one in October and the other one's scheduled for March. And we have had 2 years of the pandemic. And, you know, you have to be very careful about how we could operate then. And the other thing is, we're talking about working collaboratively in partnership, and we can't hurry these things along. And whilst we are all passionate about our environment, we need to move at a pace which suits all parties, and the council is doing the best it can, and I will be there at the meeting as I was there at the first meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Mather.
Too, so it's not something that's about the pandemic, I think. But anyway, there we go. Anyway, my next question.
Can I just? You've got a question left, but I'll bring Councillor Hall, and then I'll come back to you. I want to try and get as many councillors.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, because we've only got half an hour.
No, that's fine.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Leader. Just on the back, really, of what's been said about reaction to the climate emergency. And one of the things that we ought to be concerned about is not just reducing our own carbon footprint, but also to take mitigating action against some of the things that happen at the moment, including the floods. And that's what I want to ask Councillor Mather about this weekend. First of all, would she join with me in thanking all the staff that were out in very inclement weather for a long time over the weekend, tackling what they had to tackle, and it is much appreciated, much appreciated. But secondly, would she also agree with me that the Cabinet are responsible to setting the resources available to our staff to tackle the flooding? We were told we'd had substantial flooding of the highways in the Spen Valley over the weekend. And we were told repeatedly when we rang up that no sandbags would be available until properties were beginning to flood. Now, would she agree with me that this is not a good policy to have? We had quite distressed residents, and we were out, other councillors and myself, talking to residents on Sunday night. Could you please clarify what the policy is? And if that is not the policy, could she urgently review the policy to make sure that we're getting the right answers on the ground, please?
Councillor Mather.
Thank you. Like you, I'd like to thank all our staff services from across the council that were out all weekend responding to the ongoing severe weather, which has resulted in flooding in many of the river catchment areas and has caused damage, and it was extreme conditions, but we managed really well. And as I speak, I think we're still beginning to come out of the flood warnings, still remain in 7 locations and 6 river catchments. And we are continuing to monitor the conditions. We are continuing. Resources was not an issue in dealing with the emergency. I'm not saying resources aren't an issue, but we dealt with all the emergencies. Sandbags were delivered to homes, but there is a priority order of how things are done. And residents, if they did ask and they came through, I know for a fact that I fed in lots of residents coming through to me, and I was told the next time I phoned them, they said the sandbags had been delivered. Now, Councillor Hall, I can say that we can always do with more resources, but on this occasion, we dealt with the emergency very well. And if there are residents you had to deal with, please next time get in touch with me. And I'm not saying, I think the advice that was offered, that if for some reason we can't get round to your property where you can get some sandbags. So I think on this occasion, I would say that the council reacted very appropriately and is still continuing to react to severe weather that we have had over the weekend. So, but resource allocations are always useful. So, Councillor Hall, if you're lobbying the government, please ask them to put some more money into flooding.
Thank you. Councillor Hall, you got a supplementary?
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Mather, for that response. I mean, you said firstly that resources weren't an issue, and then you said, but you're not saying that resources aren't an issue. We actually got quite a fair warning of these storms. We'd a full week's warning from the Meteorological Office that these were going to hit. And it was a source of much conversation. If you talk to anybody in the preceding days, we're going to have a really bad storm, it's going to be worst. And so we had residents prepared all over the borough taking the action that they could to protect their properties and themselves from what they expected to be bad flooding. Now, unfortunately, even though the interventions that were made by the officers on the council were very welcome, we had not enough resources. It is a question of resources. We had not put enough resources in to combat what we knew was going to be a very bad flooding event. You will have noticed that at least one other group at the budget, in their budget amendment, had extra resources for flooding. And maybe the Cabinet member could just have a think, quite urgently about whether we need to put more resources into tackling flooding like this, into what unfortunately are increasingly frequent events.
Nahid?
Councillor Hall, what you say is an issue about resources. We were prepared for one storm, but we had 3. We managed. We have currently got a flooding policy review going through the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, and we will allocate resources accordingly. But at this point in time, I think the reactive teams reacted appropriately. Members of staff from across the council came out to ensure that all our residents were safe, not only on roads and bridges, but within their own properties. And all I can say is those that got in touch with the right people did get the sandbags and were looked after appropriately. So yes, we dealt with the storm, but we were talking about one storm and we had 3.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. In terms of the sandbags policy, Councillor Hall, I have actually raised that with the Chief Exec because that is something that already has come to my attention. So we will be looking at reviewing the sandbag policy. Councillor John Taylor?
Thank you, Chair. It's actually a question for you, and I'm going to make it really, really simple. It's a yes-no question. But you may not want to answer it. Does a business case exist for the acquisition of the George Hotel? The acquisition of the George Hotel?
I'll get back to you on that because I can't answer that yes or no at this moment in time. And because there is controversial issues around this, I need to seek advice because I don't want to make any comments just in case the interpretations are misrepresented.
I'm struggling with. I'm struggling because I would hope, as leader of the council, you had sight of the business case for the acquisition of the George Hotel before the George Hotel was acquired. And if you didn't have sight of acquisition, the business case before the acquisition, are you telling us that the decision was made to purchase the George Hotel without you, as leader, having sight of a business case? You must be able to answer that one, I'm afraid, Shabir.
Yeah, I'll answer it. You know, we bought the George Hotel with the decision that was made at this cabinet meeting. We had some private papers in yellow which listed everything that we need to know to make a decision, and that is the basis we made a decision. I will seek some advice from our council solicitor in terms of if some yellow pages can be released to non-cabinet members, because remember, a lot of the things that we're talking about are commercially sensitive, and first and foremost, the interest of this council and this cabinet is to make sure we safeguard the public purse. While we are going through any process, if anything that is confidential leaks out, then commercially that might not be a good advantageous position for the council. So what I will do is I will make sure that you get a full response. I will make sure that whatever we can share that were in the private papers for us to enable to be in a position to make a decision for the acquisition, I'll get them over to you.
With respect, Shabir, I didn't ask to see them. I haven't asked to see any private papers. I asked you a very simple question. Did a business case exist for the acquisition of the George Hotel before that decision to acquire it and pay the money over was put in place? I've not asked to see anything. I've not asked to see commercial
My apologies, John.
Sensitivities. I'm asking a simple question. Does it exist, yes or no?
Thank you for the clarification. So I will not get you the papers and I will not seek advice on that, but we had all the information that we needed to make a decision. But what I'll do is I'll ask Councillor Peter McBride to just put his hand up to come in. Peter?
See, Councillor Taylor and his sidekick are trying to make the point of you need a business case for any action you might take over the whole plan. This is complete. The whole reason why we brought in consultants was that we couldn't ourselves determine the criteria or the the adequate response. Therefore, we're being guided fully by consultants in this and in other features of the total development of the town. Now, we acquired the hotel. It was a reasonable thing to do because it was a sensible thing that was in the interests of the town. Now, every time that you have an issue of that nature, do you need a business plan for every... If you had that, you would never have done anything. But you see, this is their standard answer. When they have no other answers for anything, they need a business plan for everything. You may remember at the budget, they wanted a business plan, and because they hadn't got a business plan, they just swiped 25 million from the programme. They had no business plan about it, and therefore they just attempted to impose this, and then apply a totally different criteria, or literally the opposite criteria, to apply to us. The rationality is insane. It's as simple as that.
Chair, point of clarification. I've never used the word business plan. I actually asked about a business case.
Yeah, well,
Peter's been talking about business plan.
Case, yes.
So he's answering a question I didn't ask.
So, Councillor Taylor, I've given you... Councillor Cooper, you have another question.
Yeah, I'd love to comment on that further, but I'll leave it alone. On the just as a suggestion, which I'll phrase as a question, do you think that perhaps one of the ways approaching the floods issue, and I do give credit to the Kirklees staff who did work hard during that. I came across a lot of Kirklees staff working down Queensmill Road when that was flooded on Sunday. I was down there with Councillor Karen Allison. We also had residents at Armitage Bridge who were in imminent danger, it seemed, of being flooded down Deanbrook Road. They too had difficulty getting through to the Kirklees emergency number, and I tried 4 times to get through, and eventually did get through. And I know that Kirklees Highways, or the people who were doing it, were caught out by circumstances, which happens. But perhaps we're going about this in the wrong way. And do you agree with me that perhaps one approach we might have is to provide vulnerable households with flood sacks, which are a sandbagless sandbag, and provide those for households, so those that are in imminent danger can actually place these themselves, because they have them in the garage, they have them on their own premises, to protect their homes. If you believe this is a good idea, then pursue it. If you don't, then that's okay, because we'll buy these out of our ward budgets. And we reckon to protect a certain number of houses, it'll only cost us a few £100. So instead of hoping and praying that Kirklees Highways get there in time, that they will already be on the premises, and staff will not be placed in that position. So is that something that the council itself would provide, or shall news and members provide it for our residents to protect them ourselves directly?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Cooper. I think it's a very similar question to Councillor David Hall regarding sandbags, or however you want to put the term in terms of protecting households. Like I said, I had a conversation with Jackie straight away on Monday, and this is one of the areas we need to look at very, very quickly, because we can't wait for the whenever, we need to review this very, very quickly, because the situation is gonna get worse probably in terms of the kind of weather we're seeking. So the short answer is yes. Okay. Supplementary.
Thank you. And so if you can provide me with a written response, so we've got something written down explaining that the answer is yes, and how the answer is yes will make its way through into things that are actually done. Yeah. That's supplementary.
Your question was that, do we need to review the policy around protecting people's homes and use sandbags, or do we actually use our devolved budgets to buy the sandbags? My answer to you, my apologies if I misunderstood you. Your question was so long. You started with a question, then you went into a comment, and then you started a question, and then you completely diverted into something completely different. So, my apologies. Can you please clarify exactly what your question is?
Will you provide the at-risk households with flood sacks, which are a sandless sandbag which people can have in their own home so they're ready to do it themselves. Or if you won't, we can do it out of ward budgets, but that's only if you don't do it.
And like I said, Andrew, we need to review the whole policy around sandbags or whatever whatever you call them. Yeah, sorry. Sand sacks. Yeah, yeah. We need to do it. Yeah, we need to do it very, very quickly. I don't see what the issue is, right? Yeah, you know, we can do that very, very quickly. You know, we don't need a debate about it. Unless I'm missing the point. Anyway, any more questions? Andrew, you got Councillor Hall.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just to come back again on the issue of flooding, Councillor Mather said that assistance was given and sandbags were given to people who got in touch with the right people. Those were your words. And Councillor Cooper's just said he rang several times and didn't get an answer.
Okay. So,
hang on a minute, let me just finish this off, because I rang myself and didn't get an answer either. And I understand that staff are under pressure, but we have put this policy in place and it's got to work. And I'm concerned it's not working. When you say get in touch with the right people, I ended up phoning the Chief Executive on Sunday night, which I shouldn't have to do because it's her own time and I shouldn't be disturbing her a weekend. But faced with people who are very, very worried because they've got flooded waters within 6 inches of the doorstep and require sandbags or something, I should not have to be phoning the Chief Exec at 7 o'clock on a Sunday night. So could you please, you know, when you're doing this review, make sure we've got enough people on the telephones and enough people on the ground to actually deliver the stuff. It would be appreciated. Thank you.
Councillor Hall, point taken. The telephone lines were busy, and when I said the right people, I meant those that came through via councillors, or councillors got in touch with me, or residents got in touch with me directly. The best way I found was using the email, and that was picked up as well. And these are extenuating circumstances, and by use you learn. So next time we'll do better, and subsequent times we will do better. In relation to sandbags, not everyone has garages or places to put back-to-back terraced housing, has nowhere to put these sandbags stacked for years when we don't need it. And if councillors have their own budget, maybe they should put that into buying the sandbags for their residents.
I'll bring you in, Andrew. I've got Councillor John Taylor who wants to ask a question. I'll bring you back.
To be fair, Shabir, it's probably worth Andrew going before me.
If you're willing to give it, not a problem. Councillor Cooper, and you heard the commit from me, and we need to get it on with it. But yeah, if you really want to come back, you can do that.
I've got a garage. And I'm quite happy for my garage to be the store for people, because people can get, we're able to get in touch with me, but they won't be able to get through to the council at that time. So I'll happily do that for people who haven't got the space for that. So that's not an issue. We've got to be in a problem-solving mode, really. So
thank you, and I'll make sure that we know that you've got a garage that can store sandbags. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I'll ask a question in a second, but if you just a comment on the discussions being going on about sand sacks to feed into that review. Possibly there are some community buildings that could be used as stores as well. So it's just probably one worth thinking about. But my question actually is about planning. And I'm not sure whether you want to take that or you're going to ask Councillor McBride. Right. To be fair, it's not that bad. So we all know that the planning team are under pressure at the moment. So the capacity isn't as great as we would like it to be, and therefore there are delays arising as a result of that. But obviously, all of those delays have a real impact on the people, be they people who have applied for planning, or be they people that are trying to prevent some planning. It doesn't really matter which side of the argument you're on. There are impacts on people's lives. I have a number of cases that I've been dealing with that have been outstanding for over a year. And I just wonder, what is the administration doing, firstly, to monitor how many cases we have that are outside of the standard time within which we would hope to respond? And then secondly, do we have a view on, you know, the longest time ones have been waiting? So have we got those metrics? And then thirdly, if I may, what are we actually doing over and above trying to recruit more staff to try and tackle this? Because it's having an impact on people's lives, it's having an impact on businesses that can't expand or move. You know, there's a whole range of impacts that it has. So I can just ask that as a general question, please, if I may.
Councillor Peter McBride.
Thank you, Chair. There is something of a backlog, not a massive one. There is an 8-week criteria for provision, and beyond that 8 weeks, there's penalties that the council pay. We're not paying significant penalties, and we don't have a great number of cases where we overgo the 8 weeks. There are often specific circumstances. If you've got particular problems, Councillor Taylor, you want to bring to my attention, I will certainly take them up and ensure that they're responded to effectively.
Got a supplementary? Councillor Taylor?
Well, firstly to thank Councillor McBride for his offer. I will bring them to his attention. I have previously raised them with Matthias, and I've also raised them with David Shepherd, but they're still outstanding, so they are a problem. And I also, yeah, I mean, I feel a bit guilty about chasing the officers all the time, but they need to be brought to a resolution, as you can understand. But my question was about what else we're trying to do to deal with that backlog, and I didn't hear an answer to that bit, if I may.
If these are individual or specific cases, yes, I can deal with it. Whether there's a generic problem, other than the fact there are general shortages in the council and in other councils, etc., I am not aware of a major problem in that respect with regard to Kirklees services.
Yeah, I think the personnel committee, which we had a few weeks ago, it painted a picture regarding what the national situation is in terms of recruitment and selection, not just within the public sector, but also the private sector. There was also a recent survey done of the chief execs up and down the country in terms of how bad the situation is getting, and to be honest with you, the situation will get worse before it gets better. And there was also a survey done of all local authorities, not just chief execs. And again, I think that was in the Local Government Chronicle, and I've tweeted it. And to be honest with you, it paints a very bleak picture, because there is going to be a big issue around having the right people in the right places to deliver the right services, and planning is just one of them. And the bottom line is, right, is that there is nobody coming through in terms of younger talent, new talent, and the same is being witnessed in the private sector. So, you know, to actually put that right, you need to start right at the basics. You know, you need to start at secondary school, colleges, universities, and you need to start developing them skills. Because for some reason, you know, we've just got a major gap in the right skills and right talent that's coming through. And like I say, I have put it on my Twitter feed. It's not a political thing, it's just the facts. But we will keep on monitoring it. I think your advice is really, really good, because we need to monitor it so we can then start putting the cases forward. I don't mean cases in terms of planning cases, but, you know, the case forward to whoever that, you know, we need to invest more in our staff. Any more questions from members? Councillor Cooper.
A climate emergency question. So, you may know that recently Climate Emergency UK provided a 0% score to Kirklees for its response to the climate emergency. Now, I thought, you know, sometimes I have issues with the council on how it addresses climate change, but I thought that was a bit rough, actually. You know, I'd have certainly given more than naught, I think, for what I think the council's doing. I think there's some good work that's going on. So I contacted Climate Emergency UK to get off them why they gave the council such a poor score. And this is the response I got. Hi, Councillor Cooper. Thank you for your response to the Council Climate Plan Scorecards web form. The 0% score had nothing to do with if they did not respond. All councils that scored 0% did not have a publicly available plan on or before the 20th of September 2021. We had to have a deadline as with 325 councils to mark, and to give everyone a fair chance at the right of reply and audit, we need to give ourselves time to compile the data. We decided Kirklees did not have a plan due to the following statement on the website. A detailed and ambitious programme and action plan is in development to set out how Kirklees will become carbon neutral by 2038. And we contacted a council officer, whose name I can provide you with, at Kirklees for the right of reply. We are happy to be corrected, though, if Kirklees' plan was publicly available before the 20th of September 2021. So my questions are, was a plan available before September 2021? Is one available now? Or is one planned, and when will it be in place?
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you for the 3 questions, Andrew. Can I just say before I answer them, I think I've got them down briefly in response to some of the things that have been said about flooding from Councillor Cooper and Councillor Hall that were raised. It obviously relates to the climate emergency as well. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned but that we do need to do is about natural flood management in terms of reducing the amount of impact that we get so that your residents don't need the flood sacks. I think I'm the first cabinet member that said it right. Thank you, Andrew. And that is something that we are doing. As you might know, Andrew, we are the lead authority on the White Rose Forest, and we published the action plan for the White Rose Forest very recently, which I was obviously part of that and at the launch. Part of that is the Landscapes for Water programme, and we actually currently have 3 posts out in advertisement for that, 2 of which are project officers, one is the project manager. The closing date for that is Sunday, so if members could share those with I know you're very busy, Andrew, I know what you do, don't worry about that. If you'd be able to share those with your networks to make sure that we're maximising the reach of those and get some good people in place, that would be appreciated, because it is really important, as well as reacting to flooding, but to make sure that we minimise the impact as well. On to your question. So, as you'll know, we had a phase 1 action plan, which came out of the climate emergency working group, which I believe you're a part of. I think every group was a part of it other than the Conservative Party. So obviously we had the phase 1 actions. So we do have an action plan. We've been building on that since. We've obviously, I'm not just going to reel off everything that came out of the phase 1 actions, but I'm sure you're aware of them, about the EV vehicles, EV charging. We've switched to renewable energy. As you know, in the budget, we've now invested a further £6 million in further green in our fleet this year. We've got £5 million extra in electrical vehicle infrastructure this year, which is the biggest investments that we've ever had, and probably beating the vast majority of other councils in terms of investment in EV, both our fleet and infrastructure this year. So we are doing really important things. As you'll know, we outperformed against our previous target. We got 53% rather than 40% carbon reduction against the 2005 baseline, and we performed against that early. So there is a lot that we're doing, and as I've said, we did have a phase 1 plan. The carbon roadmap technical appraisal that we commissioned from the University of Leeds as a council has been what we hope completed. We received a copy of that. I was happy with it, and we took that to the most recent meeting of the Climate Commission. We were hoping that could be agreed as a partnership document at that meeting. The Climate Commission wanted to ask a few more questions about some of the underlying elements of that, so they are going to be they've considered that further, and we'll be hopefully agreeing that as a partnership document very shortly, and that will then inform a much wider strategy, because we know that the climate emergency isn't just about carbon. We can't just look at it through a carbon lens, like we heard from Claire's deputation earlier. It's about ecology, biodiversity. There's all sorts of issues that we have to consider to have a strategy that has sustainability at its heart, not just about carbon, but about all of the factors that matter. So we're going to have a very wide-ranging and I think leading strategy, which I hope we can all agree in the summer.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor Cooper, supplementary.
Yeah, I listened carefully to what you said, and I'm aware of the phase 1 and the phase 2 actions, and there's a lot of actions there, but what I don't believe I've seen yet, and I have heard what you've said, but is an action plan which details the actions that will be taken that will enable us to achieve zero carbon economy by 2038. So that I don't believe exists somewhere unless you can go, there you go, that's it. So I'd be interested in seeing that. The University of Leeds study, again, I'd be interested in seeing it. It doesn't sound from what you've said that is a climate action plan, actually. That doesn't sound like that's what it is, the way you've described it. But, I'm sure it'll be an interesting document.
Thank you, Councillor Will Simpson. Quickly, because we are now out of the half an hour, so we need to move on.
Yep. So the University of Leeds study is essentially a mini Stern, and as I said, it's a technical options appraisal of how we can most effectively reach our carbon targets, which, as you said, we're all aware of. So it combines carbon reductions with the economic case for those, and how can we most effectively get to those in an economic way against our targets. We need that work to be able to have an action plan, because we don't want to just pull together a document. I don't want to come to you or to this council with an action plan and wave around a piece of paper that doesn't have the scientific basis that I can have the confidence to say that we're actually going to do it. Because as you know, we've only got one shot at getting this right, and we can't. I'm not going to come to council with a piece of paper, wave it around, and feel all self-righteous about it, but that isn't based, that I don't know is going to deliver. So we've been waiting on that because we need to have that scientific basis to be able to have confidence in making sure that we're going to get there, and that's why we need that, and that's why I'm hoping that it'll be agreed by the Commission very, very shortly, and then I'll be able to come, well, hopefully, depending on what happens in May, obviously, hopefully I'll be able to come and bring you that action plan in the summer. But as you say, we have had a number of actions that we've taken already, and despite the rating that we've had from Climate Emergency UK, we are taking a lot of really, really important actions, and I think this council is playing a leading role in tackling the climate emergency amongst local authorities.
Thank you, Councillor Will Simpson. Thanks for all councillors for their questions, and just like to put on record for all the hard work that our officers have put in over the recent floods and the storms, I'm sure all the councillors in this council share that same appreciation. Can we move on to item 8, admission arrangements for community and voluntary control schools in 2023-24? Councillor Carol Patterson, over to you.
Thank you, Leader. This is the annual report of admission arrangements, or the review of admission arrangements for Kirklees maintained schools. This follows a consultation which took place between the 22nd of November last year, 21, and the 2nd of January this year. And as a result of that, there are no proposed changes to the scheme for admissions to our maintained schools in the years 23-24. But this report also just does report on a couple of other things as well. One is the school organisational proposal, or the reorganisation of St John's C of E Infant School in Dewsbury, and as a consequence of that also Westmoor Primary School. The PAN in those two schools is changing in St John's from 60 to 30, and in Westmore to 45 to 60. St John's, having gone to the school's adjudicator to having appealing our decision not to change their admission arrangements. They went to the school's adjudicator, and the adjudicator agreed with them that they could change their admission arrangements. So they are now becoming an all-through primary school, infants and junior, which is the reason for the change of their PAN. The other couple of things which are in this report is one, just a report on for this last year, well, the last 5 years, but gives you the allocation results based on parent preference for all schools, primary and secondary school. And against the national average there, you will see that we managed to place pupils in the school of their first preference more often than the national figure there. So we're always above the national figures on that one. And then finally, as a result of the admission arrangements or the admission changes at St John's Infant School, we had to work very quickly following the decision that was first off taken by the Cabinet and then by the school's adjudicator to put in place for this coming year, September 22, the arrangements that they needed to make. And that showed up a need for some delegated power arrangements to act in these in some circumstances where it is necessary in terms of schools' arrangements to do so quickly. So this report is also asking that there's delegated authority to the Service Director for Learning and Early Support, following consultation with the portfolio holder for Learning Aspiration and Communities, to approve applications to the school's adjudicator for variations. So that's an important point, but a relatively minor one. So the recommendations of this report are that we recommend that the Cabinet approve the coordinated admission schemes for 23-24, that the admission arrangements for Kirklees community and voluntary controlled schools, as detailed in Appendix 1 to the report, are agreed, that the PANs for each schools are set out in Appendix 1D, including the changes to St John's Infant School and Westmore, as I've already mentioned, and then finally to delegate authority to the Service Director for Learning and Early Support, following consultation with the portfolio holder, for variations in schools admissions where that needs to go to the school's adjudicator. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Are we all in favour? Anybody, any questions? Thank you, that's carried. Item number 9, Catering Service Baseline Capital Plan. Proposed allocation for funding for 2021-22, 22-23, 2-year baseline programmes. Councillor Carol Patterson, over to you.
Thank you. The capital plan for the school's catering service has, or the full amount has already been agreed in previous Cabinet reports, and this report today is just detailing how the £400,000 over the next 2 years is to be spent, and you will see that that's basically on maintenance. It's not on fantastic new additional services, but hopefully fantastic new routine services. So it's new service areas, trolleys, cutlery, crockery, etc. And all told, it amounts to 400,000, as I said, over the next 2 years. And basically, it is just giving you the detail of that. But again, we're asking for some delegated authority to the council's to manage the implementation of the works that have been identified in that 400,000, in case of a need of variation, so we don't need to come back to Cabinet to ask for every small variation in a detail of something that's been commissioned. so that that is actually delegated to the well, it's delegated in authority with the council's financial procedures. To the service director, sorry, culture and visitor economy, I couldn't see it. And again, that's all that's in this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Will Simpson, you seconding this?
Thank you very much, Shabir. I'd like to second this report and thank everyone involved. I think it's a chance for us to talk ourselves up and be proud of this, because we do have the best school catering service in the country. It's been proven. We've got a certificate to the extent that this investment isn't council capital, but it's self-financing from the success that we have through this service. So it's a really, really welcome report and an absolutely fantastic service, and I'm delighted to second it.
Thank you. I can't see anybody else putting their hands up. It's just past 4 o'clock, so I'll quick show of hands. Thank you very much. That's the end of the agenda, you'd like to know. Good night and God bless. God bless. Bye-bye.